It's a quiet Tuesday night in a neighborhood where everyone knows everyone. The lawns are trimmed, the driveways have minivans, kids ride bikes here. But underneath one of those perfectly ordinary homes, beneath the carpet, beneath the concrete crawl space, there are bodies. Not one, not two, 33. The neighbors called him the nicest guy on the block. He threw block parties, he cooked food for the whole street, he dressed as a clown for children's birthday parties. His name was John Wayne Gacy, and for over a decade, he committed one of the most monstrous series of murders in American history, right underneath the noses of his neighbors, his friends, and the police. This is the story of the house that swallowed 33 young men. This is the story of how a monster hid in plain sight. And this is the story of the detective who finally dug up the truth. To understand what happened on Summerdale Avenue in Norwood Park Township, Illinois, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to go back to a boy named John. John Wayne Gacy Jr. was born on March 17, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois. On the surface, his childhood looked ordinary. His father was a World War II veteran. His mother kept the home. But beneath that surface, things were deeply broken. John's father, John Sr., was a violent, cold, and deeply critical man. He drank, he hit, and he had a particular cruelty reserved for young John, calling him a sissy, a mama's boy, a failure. No matter what John did, it was never enough. When John was a child, he was struck on the head by a swing, causing a blood clot in his brain that went undetected for years. Doctors believe it contributed to blackouts he experienced throughout his childhood. He was a sickly kid. A weak heart kept him out of sports. His father used that against him too. Psychologists who later studied Gacy would identify this period as formative. A boy who desperately wanted approval from a father who would never give it. A boy learning to wear a mask. As a teenager, Gacy was social and charming. He worked at a grocery store. He was active in his community. He was, by all accounts, likable. That word, likable, will come up again and again in this story. It is perhaps the most terrifying word of all. In 1964, Gacy married his first wife, Marlyn Myers, and they moved to Waterloo, Iowa, where he managed his father-in-law's Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants. He was active in the JCs, a civic organization for young businessmen. He was named Outstanding Vice President of the chapter. He had a house, a wife, a career. He was, to every single person who knew him, perfectly normal. But behind closed doors, something was unraveling. In 1968, John Wayne Gacy was charged with buggery after luring someone from the JCs into a sexual assault. He was convicted of buggery in the first degree and sentenced to 10 years in the Iowa State Reformatory at Anamosa. While there, Gacy was the model prisoner. He organized a JC's chapter inside the prison. He cooked, he worked hard, he earned time off for good behavior. He was released after just 18 months. His first wife divorced him while he was in prison. When he got out, he moved back to Chicago and tried again. He remarried in 1972. He bought a house at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue in Norwood Park Township, a quiet suburban street, a normal house, a crawl space beneath the floors. By the mid-1970s, John Wayne Gacy had rebuilt his life, at least on paper. He started his own construction company, PDM Contractors, painting, decorating, and maintenance. The business was a success. Gacy was known for taking on young men as employees, mostly teenagers and young adults looking for work. He paid them well. He was friendly. He joked around on job sites. He was the boss who really cared. And then there was Pogo the Clown. In his spare time, Gacy had developed a clown persona. He would dress in full face paint, a colourful costume and a big red nose, and perform at children's birthday parties, hospital wards, and local charity events. Neighbours adored Pogo, kids loved him, parents trusted him. He threw legendary neighbourhood parties, massive cookouts on the front lawn where he'd barbecue for the whole street. He became involved in local Democratic Party politics, eventually having his photo taken with Rosalind Carter, the wife of President Jimmy Carter. That photo would later haunt investigators. The man shaking hands with the First Lady had by that point already begun killing. His second wife, Carol Hoff, would later describe their marriage as confusing and cold. He showed no interest in her. He would bring young men home late at night, claiming they were employees. She smelled something in the house, a strange, foul odor rising from beneath the floors. Gacy told her it was moisture, probably a drainage problem. She believed him. She left him in 1976. By that point, experts believe Gacy had already killed at least 6 people. What happened next in that house, in those rooms, in that darkness, is beyond the scope of what I can fully describe here. What I will tell you is this. And then, one by one, John Wayne Gacy carried their bodies down into the crawl space beneath his house. He dug trenches. He poured lime over the bodies to accelerate decomposition. He went back upstairs. He made coffee. He went to work. Before we go any further, I want to stop, because in true crime, it is dangerously easy to focus on the killer, to make him the main character. He is not the main character of this story. The victims are. Timothy McCoy was 15 years old. He was passing through Chicago on a Greyhound bus when Gacy approached him at the bus station in January 1972. Gacy invited him to spend the night rather than sleep in the station. Timothy never made it back to his bus. He was Gacy's first known victim. John Butkovich was 17. He was one of Gacy's own employees. He had gone to Gacy's home demanding back pay for work he'd done. He was murdered in 1975. His parents spent 3 years telling police something was wrong, that their son had gone to Gacy's house and vanished. Police did nothing. 3 years. Gregory Godzik was 17. He worked for PDM contractors. He disappeared in December 1976 after a shift. His parents hired a private investigator. They too pointed police toward Gacy. Nothing was done. Robert Piest was 15 years old. He was a bright, athletic boy from Des Plaines, Illinois. On the night of December 11th, 1978, his mother waited for him outside a pharmacy where he worked. Robert came in, excited. He said a contractor had offered him a summer job. He wanted to go talk to him quickly. He'd be right back. He never came back. Robert Piest's disappearance would be the crack that broke the case wide open, because his mother was not going to wait for police. She walked into the Des Plaines Police Department and told them exactly what her son had said. The contractor's name was Gacy, and one investigator, Lieutenant Joseph Kozenchak, listened. Kozenchak ran Gacy's record. He found the 1968 sodomy conviction in Iowa. He went to speak with Gacy personally. And here is where this story takes a turn that still makes investigators' skin crawl decades later. Gacy was calm. He was charming. He offered the detective coffee. He said he'd been at work that evening, that he barely knew the kid, that there must be some confusion. He seemed completely, utterly relaxed. But Kozenchak wasn't finished. He applied for a search warrant and assigned a surveillance team to watch Gacy around the clock. On December 13, 1978, investigators searched Gacy's house for the first time. They found a high school ring belonging to a missing student. They found a receipt with Robert Piest's name on it, found in Gacy's jacket pocket, and in the garage, and throughout the house. That smell, damp, rotten, unmistakable. Gacy had an explanation for everything. Drainage problems, old pipes, construction materials. The search team filed their notes and left. Over the next several days, investigators continued building their case. They interviewed Gacy's employees, and the stories they heard were disturbing. Employees who had been assaulted, others who'd barely escaped. One young man who said Gacy had handcuffed him, as a joke, and then sexually assaulted him, warning him no one would believe him if he told. Meanwhile, Gacy threw a Christmas party at his house. His neighbors came. They ate. They laughed. The bodies were still in the crawl space beneath their feet. On December 20th, 1978, investigators arrested Gacy on a charge of theft of a controlled substance, a minor charge to keep him detained while they continued their work. That night, with Gacy in custody, detectives returned to 8213 West Somerdale Avenue. They brought a full team. They brought shovels. And they began to dig. The first body was found within hours. By the next morning, there were more. By the end of the week, 27 bodies had been removed from the crawl space. The space was so crowded that Gacy had begun stacking remains on top of each other. When the crawl space ran out of room, he had, investigators found, thrown 4 bodies into the Des Plaines River. The total count reached 33 victims. 33. The youngest was 9 years old. The oldest was in his late 20s. Most were teenagers. Most were runaways. Young men looking for work. Men who no one would immediately notice were missing. And that, investigators later reflected, is precisely why Gacy chose them. He hunted the overlooked. John Wayne Gacy was charged with 33 counts of murder. His defense team attempted to argue insanity, that Gacy suffered from multiple personality disorder, that another Gacy committed the crimes. Prosecutors painted a very different picture. They showed that every murder required planning, secrecy, and concealment. That Gacy purchased the lime. That Gacy dug the trenches. That Gacy returned to work the next morning. That is not insanity. That is calculation. During the trial, Gacy was composed, even theatrical. He whispered to his lawyers. He smiled at the cameras. He seemed to everyone watching almost bored. At one point, he sketched portraits of himself as Pogo the Clown during proceedings. The courtroom was gripped by a particular brand of horror. The horror of encountering someone who simply does not understand why what they did was wrong. Or worse, someone who understands perfectly and feels nothing. On March 12, 1980, after just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found John Wayne Gacy guilty of all 33 counts of murder. He was sentenced to death. While on death row, Gacy maintained his composure. He gave interviews. He painted. His clown portraits became disturbingly collectible, selling to true crime enthusiasts for hundreds of dollars each. He insisted, even to the end, that he was innocent, that the real killer had framed him, using his own crawl space. He claimed to be the real victim. On May 10, 1994, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection at Stateville Correctional Center in Crest Hill, Illinois. His last meal was fried chicken. His last words reportedly were, "Kiss my ass." He was 52 years old. In 1979, the house at 82113 West Somerdale Avenue was demolished. The neighbors who had laughed at his cookouts, the families who had hired him as a contractor, the community leaders who had shaken his hand. They all tore it down. They wanted the physical reminder gone. A new house was built on the lot, but the new address was changed. No one wanted to live at 8213 West Somerdale. The street was quietly renumbered, as if changing the number could change what happened there. Of the 33 victims, 8 were never identified. For decades, those 8 young men lay in graves marked only with numbers. Advances in DNA technology in recent years have slowly, painstakingly, begun to match those remains with missing persons reports, with families who never stopped looking. As recently as 2023, investigators were still working to identify one of Gacy's final unidentified victims. These families waited over 40 years for an answer. Some are still waiting. There is a question that investigators, psychologists, and journalists have been asking since 1978. How did this go on for so long? Gacy killed from 1972 to 1978, 6 years. Multiple families had gone to police. Multiple young men had reported assaults. His 1968 sodomy conviction was on record. And yet, for 6 years, John Wayne Gacy operated with near-total impunity. The uncomfortable answer that experts have arrived at is this: Gacy's victims were largely young, poor, sometimes homeless, often without stable family support. They were the kind of missing persons that, in 1970s America, didn't generate the same urgency as others. A well-connected businessman, charming, community-minded, politically active, was simply not a credible suspect. The system that was supposed to protect his victims looked the other way, and 33 people paid for that with their lives. The Gacy case fundamentally changed how law enforcement handles missing persons reports for young adults. It influenced reforms in how police share information across jurisdictions. It became one of the key cases studied in the development of FBI criminal profiling, and it forced a nation to confront a deeply uncomfortable truth. Monsters do not look like monsters. They look like your neighbor. They look like the guy who throws parties. They look like the man handing out candy at the kids' Christmas parade. They look normal, and that is the most terrifying thing of all. Before I go, I want to read you the names. Not the killer's name, theirs. Timothy McCoy, 15. John Butkovich, 17. Darrell Sampson, 18. Randall Reffett, 15. Samuel Stapleton, 14. Michael Bonin, 17. William Carroll, 16. Rick Johnston, 17. Kenneth Parker, 16. Michael Marino, 14. William Bundy, 19. Gregory Godzik, 17. John Sick, 19. John Prestige, 20. Matthew Bowman, 19. Robert Gilroy, 18. John Morey, 19. Russell Nelson, 21. Robert Winch, 16. Tommy Bowling, 20. David Talsma, 19. William Kindred, 19. Timothy O'Rourke, 20. Frank Landingen, 19. James Mazara, 21. Robert Peast, 15. And 7 others, whose names we still do not know. If you want to help identify Gacy's unidentified victims, links to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NamUs, are in the description below. This story is real. These people were real, and they deserved so much better than what this world gave them. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, share it. Not because of the killer, but because of the 33 people whose stories deserve to be told. Leave a comment below with the name of a victim you want remembered, and I'll see you in the next one.